Well, as an architect, I say a recovering architect, I can imagine a future where people are healthier. I can imagine a future where the planet is healthier. How do together people in the health professions, people in the design professions, people in politics, activists, others, make that vision possible, and what are its parameters? What are the specifics that you could imagine on three different scales? A very, very small scale, I could use the example of taking parking places away from cars and transforming them, whether in New York or in Los Angeles, into what we've started to call parklets, tiny little parks the size of one or two parking spaces. But people could sit in those parks. There are plants. It's a pleasant environment, a public environment, not a private terrace for someone's cafe or restaurant. And the sidewalk is still passable, because sometimes the sidewalks in old towns, traditional neighborhoods, are very narrow. And to have a sidewalk terrace on the sidewalk benefiting the restaurant is not always possible. But how did the seats then come that allow people with stamina problems to stop along the way and maybe walk more if they have an impediment, not just age, but if they're walking more slowly, or if they have a sports injury walking with a cane? Where do you stop and sit and enjoy the walk, but get the exercise that the walk allows because there's a place to sit? That's on a small scale. On the larger scale, the incentivization of moving in a different way, yes, through bicycles, but even in looking at what the city of New York is doing with zoning as a tool to try to make it more lucrative, more successful for bodegas and small grocery stores to sell fresh food, to make fresh food accessible at the major subway stops, where the express lane stops. Previously fast food and unhealthy food in the majority of cases. So on a somewhat larger scale, you could look at not just the network of bike lanes, but at how regulations change behavior, incentivize or create opportunities for that. At the very large scale, we talk a lot about energy. And if the goal in many cities, in Guangzhou and Ahmedabad, not just in European cities, in Mexico City and New York City, certainly Los Angeles, is to reduce vehicular use because of carbon emissions. How do you start? Well, you try to get people to not want to buy a car. Make it very expensive to park, make it very expensive to leave or come back, more like London has done that very successfully, New York not so. Or you create a system where people who might only occasionally need a car could easily get a public car, as in Paris or in Columbus, Ohio. New York doesn't have that quite yet, but someday it will. Or you say, as a matter of policy, you promote the use of alternative means of transportation, bus rapid transit, so that the bus goes much, much quicker because it has a dedicated lane, or bicycles by safe and separated, isolated bike lanes, so that people can get around without fearing for their lives or their heads. And that's a matter of public policy at a political level. And at some level, all of these decisions are political in the small p sense of how do we use public resources? How do we make public-private partnerships and sponsorships and making things happen that couldn't happen only through the public sector alone? And how do we make it not top-down? How do we make the locational decisions about where transportation interventions take place something that comes from communities in need, something that has degrees of social and economic equity, and who's making those decisions anyway? And where are we all at a conference like this in helping to formulate the policies or advise the policymakers on what's the right thing to do, what's the ethical thing to do, and from a design point of view, what's the wonderful thing to do?